The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is November 16th, 2025, and once again we are going to look at the situation within Ukraine. So, let's begin. First of all, we are going to look at the Zaporizhzhia direction. The Russians have apparently continued their advances in the towns of Primorsk and Stepnogorsk. But at this time, due to the lack of information, that is, I don't really have much to say on this front. But we do, however, have information coming from the Orikhiv direction. Apparently, the Russians, after a month or two of fighting in Mala Takhmachka, have apparently captured the whole village, though Syriac is playing it safe and has only covered one half of Mala Takhmachka instead. And as a result, as you can see, the Russians are very much on their merry way to the town of Orikhiv, or Orikov, and once they're able to lock up Mala Takhmachka, like clear and consolidate control over this village, then they will be able to attack Orikhiv from the east and also from the south, because Russians are also rumored to be pushing in the village of NOVOPAVLOVKA. Now, moving further towards the east, we got the unraveling Gulaipol front, aka also the western, like southwestern Dnipropetrovsk direction. The Russians have completed their control over Rivnopilia or Rivno Pole, and also capturing the village of Yablukove. Russians have also now put the villages of Zeleny Gai, Viskoe, and Vasily in a cauldron. So Ukrainians have no, reliable way out of these villages. They are stuck, and if there's anybody left in here, they're either going to surrender or they're going to be killed. Now, personally, if you ask me, I think the armed forces of Ukraine are going to give up these villages, including Zaporizhzhia, without a fight, and once that happens, the Russians will be at the gates of Gulaipol from the east, and also, in addition, I want to mention that the Russians are also pushing towards the west, too, towards the villages of Zeleny, Varvarivka, and also Dobropila, not to be confused with the one in Donetsk region. If the Russians are able to cut off this road here going to the north, other than Danilovka, then Ukrainians will likely not be able to put up a fight, because the high ground is mostly under Russian control when it comes to Gulaipol itself, and there's even reports that Ukrainians are beginning to evacuate from the town itself, mainly because the logistics here are just screwed. There is no way for them to hold on to the town, unless they want to deal with high casualties. Now, going further up north, apparently the village of Oristopol, which is south of the big village of Veliki Kamikhalivka, has fallen to the Russians after a few days of clashes. And in addition, everything here has been leveled, along with the village of Sosnovka. Syriac had no choice now but to color the whole village back under Russian control, and it appears, according to the recent report by Vostok Group, that this area has also been seized by the Russian army as well. And then going further to the east, we have a major breakthrough, though some on the pro-Ukraine side are disputing it. Apparently, NOVOPAVLOVKA is under majority Russian control now due to bad weather, mainly fog that is, and as a result of this bad weather, the Russians now have control of over 70 to 80% of NOVOPAVLOVKA. The Ukrainians are claiming that they are starting to take out these Russian troops that are in the village of NOVOPAVLOVKA, but I honestly don't believe them. I mean, unless you have flags and such to raise up, I'm not going to believe those claims. So yeah, NOVOPAVLOVKA is under majority Russian control, and if the whole village were to fall, then we can pretty much count down to the Battle of Mazova, which is probably going to happen as early as late December to early January of 2026. Now, as for the Krasnaya Amisk, aka Pokrovsk, I almost said Dnipropetrovsk, when in reality it's Pokrovsk, that is. The Russians have continued their advances in the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk, along with also advancing to within the city of Myanograd, which is tightly contested right now. So the recent deep state updates have suggested that these northern dachas here within Pokrovsk are now in a gray zone. So it is very likely at this point, in addition to recent geolocations that have been released lately by the Russian armed forces, that the whole entirety of the city of Pokrovsk is now likely under Russian control, and that Myanograd is now 100% cut off from any sort of supplies and any sort of hope whatsoever from being saved by a Ukrainian counteroffensive. And speaking of Myanograd, which I mentioned a moment or so ago, the Russians are starting to clear out the rest of southern Myanograd. So once all this is captured, then we can pretty much say that around 45 to 50%, around half of the city will be under Russian control. And I honestly don't think that any of these fields here, west of Myanograd, southern Myanograd that is, are under Ukrainian control anymore. And as you could also see, Lisovka and Suky are also under Russian control here too. So the logistics going into Novogradivka have been completely locked up and cemented. And once southern Myanograd falls, along with these commie blocks here, then I don't really see the Russians having that much of an issue going into the central part of Myanograd. And speaking of which, the Russians have now seized a significant chunk of the commie blocks within Myanograd itself. And by the way, I think this is the largest and the most vital district in all of the city. So once the Russians are able to take full control of this micro-district here, this very large micro-district that is, I mean, even though on the satellite imagery it may look small, but if you look at the videos that are being filmed there, it's actually pretty big. It's really big. Once the Russians are able to take this neighborhood here full of commie blocks, then the rest of Myanograd is probably just going to fall like dominoes. And then the rest of the armed forces of Ukraine will have no choice but to surrender or die, just like how things are right now in Gulaipol. So, yeah. The city of Myanograd is on its last legs, and I honestly think it's only a matter of time before the city completely falls to Russian control, and then we will then see the start of the second push towards Dobrapila, or perhaps we're going to get a proper push, that is, into the Dnipropetrovsk region from this area here. Russians and Ukrainians have also continued clashing for Shakove here, and to be honest with you guys, I think Shakove is now under Russian control pretty much, though Ukrainians seem to be continuing to go on the counteroffensive here, but that's about it. Otherwise, though, these fields recently came under Russian control, and that's the end of that. And then going in the Konstantinovka direction, the Russians have continued advancing within the village, sizable village that is, of Ivanopilia, and have taken control more of these fields here, outside of the residential areas. I feel like by the end of November, or perhaps the end of the first week of December, Ivanopilia is going to completely fall to Russia. And then after that, the armed forces of Ukraine that are in this area here, which would consist of Bereztuk, and I guess some parts of southern Konstantinovka, are going to come under Russian fire. And it won't surprise me whatsoever if the Russians dig deeper into Konstantinovka itself right before the end of 2025 proper. Now, let's go to Sivers's direction. Apparently, the Russians have continued their push from the south, and as far as I know, nothing here has really changed too much, though I can definitely assure you that Ukrainians are pretty much screwed here. Their logistics are completely messed up. But, however, you have to remember that the army grouping that is responsible for taking the town of Siversk is not as well ran as Group Center and Group Vostok are. Even not as good as Group Dnieper, that is. So yeah, they're still going to take their sweet old time with Siversk. Liman, no changes, especially with its outskirts, that is. Though some clashes are reportedly still ongoing in Novoselivka. And then, going further up to the north, apparently the armed forces of Ukraine are attempting to counterattack and retake the entirety of western Kupiansk, which is the main part of the entire city of Kupiansk proper. They're trying to retake all of this, and there are reports of heavy casualties on both sides. Though time will tell if the Ukrainian counterattack will pay off, but to be quite honest with you guys, I think their odds of succeeding are kind of 50-50, considering the fact that even though the Russian logistics there are kind of messy at this time, Ukrainian logistics are not any better, and in addition, it's kind of too obvious that they would counterattack in this direction. There's also a bit of advances here on the border with the Belgrade region, as you can see here, outside of the village of Dvornichsky. And then in the city of Volchansk, the Russians are still clearing up the areas outside of the town. And that will do it for today's video. So I hope you guys found today's video, as I said a second ago or so, informative, entertaining, interesting, doesn't matter. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you guys in a few days from now. Sorry if it took me a little longer than usual for this one, but you gotta understand, I got a lot of things to do this month, but also in the next month too, so expect me to be a little bit late with some future videos. And I may cut down the uploads from every 3 days to like every 4 days or so. I mean, I hope you understand why my schedule may have to change, because real life comes first. So anyway, I hope all of you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you all next time. Peace out, and bye-bye.